Thanks for joining us today. All of our videos and discussions are archived on our videos site, which you can access for free. If you feel compelled to buy a ticket, please take that cash and instead make a contribution to the Community Journalism and Civic Engagement Fund via the Inovia Foundation. We appreciate your support.
There it is.
Hi everybody, Martha Hall Kelly here. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about my new novel, Sunflower Sisters. I'll miss going out on book tour this year, but at least I can still come to you from my home and connect with readers around the world. You may be familiar with my first two books about the Woolsey Faraday family, Lilac Girls and Lost Roses. I thought I'd share a bit about the research and historical inspiration behind those novels and how they paved the way for Sunflower Sisters. I first learned of a fascinating woman named Caroline Faraday in 1999 when I read an article in Victorian magazine about her famous gardens. The article showed photos of Caroline's home in Connecticut, now known as the Bellamy Faraday House, and photos of her renowned garden, filled with roses and lilacs. I love lilacs and really wanted to visit, but with 3 young children, I had little time to spare. But one Mother's Day, my husband Michael urged me to go, and I visited the estate, unaware that the trip would lead to my first novel. I was the only visitor on the tour of the lovely old home that spring day. During the tour, I came upon Caroline's desk, and a photograph of a group of young women caught my eye. The guide referred to them as the Rabbits and told me that Caroline took up the cause of these young Polish girls after they were experimented upon by the Nazis at Ravensbrück concentration camp. She brought them to America for rehabilitation, and once I heard their story, I was fascinated and set out to learn everything I could about them. My goal was to write a fictionalized account of actual events and to perhaps breathe new life into a story that seemed to me had fallen from public view. I started my research at the Bellamy Faraday House and then traveled to Paris, where I found another archive of Caroline's letters to immerse myself in. In Poland, I was lucky enough to interview a Ravensbrück survivor and took the train to Germany to see the concentration camp. That's a day I'll never forget. While writing and researching Lilac Girls, I came to love Caroline Faraday's mother, Eliza Woolsey Mitchell. The daughter of one of the famous Woolsey women of New York City, known for being staunch abolitionists and philanthropists, Eliza ended up devoting her time to the cause of white Russian emigres, former aristocrats in Russia who lost everything when the Bolsheviks seized power from the Tsar in 1918. When the emigres arrived in New York City, many of them destitute and traumatized, Eliza helped the women find work and a place to live. She even opened her own apartment and Southampton cottage to them. I began to embark on a new journey that inspired the story of Lost Roses. I created a wall with the other characters I wanted to add, Eliza's aristocratic Russian friend Sophia and a Russian peasant girl, Marinka. To bring the story alive for readers, I traveled to Russia and explored everything from the Tsar's palaces to rustic villages. I visited Long Island, New York, and peeked past the privacy hedges of Southampton's Gin Lane into the famous shingle-style cottages and estates. And in France, I discovered a lovely, little-known Russian part of Paris. But the place I drew the most inspiration from was again the Bellamy Faraday House. From the archives there, I used Eliza's and Caroline's letters and other personal writing to bring this story to light. This incredible family wouldn't let me go after 2 novels, so I traveled further back in time to the Civil War to tell the story of Caroline's great aunt and how she fought to be a nurse on the battlefields of the war for the North and to be part of the fight against slavery. That's how Sunflower Sisters was born. It's told from Georgeanna Woolsey's point of view, and also from the points of view of 2 fictitious characters, Gemma, a young woman enslaved on a tobacco plantation, and Anne May, the mistress of that plantation. Many of the historical events in the book are drawn from the Woolsey family letters in the archives at Caroline's house. One letter, which described the sisters seeing a slave market in Charleston, a site that set them on their path to abolitionism, sent me to South Carolina to start my research journey to see the market they described, now a museum. Luckily, I lived in Atlanta at the time, near the Atlanta History Center, with an extensive collection of Civil War artifacts, where they shared their deep knowledge of everyday life during the war. I also visited former plantations, now museums, every chance I got, in the surrounding area. Since Sunflower Sisters is set in Maryland, a border state, Sauterley Plantation was especially inspiring, on the banks of the Patuxent River. A key part of Sunflower Sisters takes place in Gettysburg on the battlefield, so I spent a lot of time there, tracing the steps of the characters so I could write about the place as accurately as possible. My son, who I dedicated the book to, came with me on those trips and helped me document my research. Gettysburg is such an incredibly moving place, and it was helpful to visit the actual sites of scenes in the book. The field hospital where Georgie and her mother, Jane Eliza, actually nursed soldiers, Union and Confederate alike, to the train station where the wounded were sent off in cattle cars, to the hallowed ground where Gemma gets caught up in battle. Caroline Faraday was a staunch supporter of civil rights. I think she'd be happy to know that her abolitionist Woolsey ancestors' stories are being told. It's been bittersweet writing Sunflower Sisters, the last in a series of books about Caroline Faraday's incredible family. But whenever I miss these characters, I know where I can find them. In the pages of Lilac Girls, Lost Roses, and now Sunflower Sisters. And I hope you will too.
Welcome to this very special 5 o'clock on a Friday edition of Northwest Passages Book Club. I'm Kristi Burns, and I am thrilled to welcome virtually Martha Hall Kelly. Yay! Here across the screen from me talking about Sunflower Sisters. Ooh, are you having a Corona? Seriously?
I am. It's
Lucky
light.
for me, I am right down the Spokesman-Review. When you come to Spokane, as I know you will, after this is all done, we have the Spokesman-Review is above a wine club or a wine place at Terra Blanca, fabulous wine over on this side. So, and also they're opening a distillery across the street. Nice.
I have both. I couldn't decide.
Well,
A winery too across the street?
Oh yeah, winery downstairs. There's a distillery actually that's opening up across the street. So yeah, time it right. It's in our old production building, actually. They've redone that to move a whole thing. It's called Dry-Fi Distillery. That's where they're going to be. But let's move away from booze, although it is book club. We can move away from that and talk about this phenomenal book, a trilogy.
Oh, thank you.
Sunflower Sisters is lovely. And you wrote kind of like, George Lucas did with Star Wars. It's backwards. You're ending it that way.
I like that comparison, though. That's great.
Well, I want to start, though, with the mother, Jane Eliza Woolsey, because there's a quote that resonated with me amazingly. She says, "It has been my experience that the people who can profit most from lessons seldom know they need them." She is such a no-nonsense mom. And the Woolsey clan, the girls, 7 girls, and then, 7 girls, and then Charles is the youngest boy? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1, can you have a favorite Woolsey sister?
Oh.
Other than Georgie, who is one of the stars of Sunflower Sisters. And how do you think that, how did her parenting affect her daughters?
Oh, that's such a great question. And you've obviously read the book, which, hooray, not everybody does.
How can you not?
It makes a great interview. So let's just, not everyone has the time. But yes, Jane Eliza Woolsey, we call her Mrs. Woolsey in the book, was really, there's her photograph. Everything came from her. All of that great stuff from Lilac Girls where Caroline Faraday did so many things and had such a strong sense of right and wrong. It all came from Jane Eliza Newton Woolsey when I went back and read all those letters that were done in the archives. And I do think that she was just a genius with parenting. And yes, she was tough, absolutely. But she was the type of person that, yes, she ruled with an iron fist, but the girls loved her and her son. They loved her so much and wanted to please her. And, she did it as a single mom because Mr. Woolsey died, as you know, from reading the book, when the kids were little. He was killed in a tragic steamship accident. In those days, people would commute from New York to New Bedford, where they lived at the time. He was a sugar merchant. And bales of cotton in the hull of the ship caught fire, and he died, sadly. So she raised these kids on her own, and they would do anything. You can tell from the letters that they're all vying for her attentions. And so I think she just had that way of getting them to love her and do anything she wanted them to do.
The references to the letters that you made, it's pretty amazing, especially now we're in a world of technology that's supposed to make everybody's life easier, and texting and the emails, archiving that kind of stuff, going through that. Number one, finding the technology to archive it, it might be difficult in the long run, but the world of handwritten letters that really connects generations and history, all of these shared experiences, when you're reading these letters, and I mean, you referenced earlier, of course, Mr. Woolsey's death. I would imagine you read about that in the newspaper or in the newspaper accounts. And then being able to read the real history that's happening from the perspective of these women in letters is pretty amazing. You did a lot of that. You had access to an amazing amount of legitimate personal journals. How did you not get lost in that? And how did you pick what to leave out, or did you?
That's another great question. When my agent read the first draft of this book, she said, "Oh, it seems like it was so much easier for you to write this one." And
writing's easy, sure.
And I just said, no, it was so much harder. And that's why, because I had all those letters and I had read them all. And, sometimes too much information is not a great thing either. So it was hard trying to decide which scenes to include in the book, because you can't have everything, and especially when there's 3 point of view characters. There was Georgie, but there's also Gemma, an enslaved girl on a tobacco plantation, and a plantation mistress, 3 characters. So I only had Georgie's chapters to use for scenes about the Woolseys. So I just made a really tight outline and picked the very best scenes. I, as it talks about in the video, I start with their trip to Charleston, because that's where they visited a slave market and saw a woman. It's the most moving letter. They see a woman being sold off herself, but also her children sold from her. And they struck up a conversation with her. They weren't allowed to go in, only men, but they were at the gates, and no one noticed them while they talked to this enslaved woman that was being sold. It's so moving. The letters are just amazing. They're tough. So, to answer your question, sometimes having too much is not good, but I did, make my way through it.
Well, when you're, you had Georgianna's letters, or the Woolsey archive, the plantation owner, Mary.
Anne May.
I read it. I did. And
very good. Anne May Watson Wilson.
But she was created, you created her out of, I don't want to say a stereotype, but a lot of different things. Gemma, though, I thought Gemma was based also on a real person. She felt.
Yeah, well, I read so much that was written during the time, but one of the most inspiring accounts, real life accounts, that I read was of Harriet Jacobs, and this is the book right here. And it is so, it's very, well loved, I guess. I just wrote all over
nice.
And Harriet Jacobs, it's an amazing story. And she was enslaved, and a man was trying to make her his kind of concubine. And she resisted and resisted. And he built her a house in the woods so that he could kind of have her as his.
Oh my God, not like LeBron.
Horrible. Yes, horrible. And so she.
Spoiler alert. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it's triggering. But there's, so she went and hid in a coffin-sized room in her aunt's house for 2 years and watched her children walk to school every morning. Her kids thought that she had died. And I mean, she lived in a space this big. So it was a really interesting, because in my book, Gemma has to deal with a horrible overseer named LeBaron Carruthers. And I just needed a little roadmap for that. And Harriet Jacobs provided that. If you want a companion book to Sunflower Sisters, this is a wonderful companion book. And it reads like, even though it is nonfiction, it reads like a novel.
We will put the links to all of the books that are referenced today during this conversation in everything that we post online afterwards. So any of you are trying to write this down, don't worry, it'll be there. And I should mention, if you're watching this live now, there is a click right above so that you can purchase this copy from Auntie's, where you have special autographed signed copies of Sunflower Sisters at Auntie's bookstore. We have a link. When you started to write this book, though, did you want to write the antithesis to Gone with the Wind? Because these are women that, you watch the movie or read Margaret Mitchell's book. I don't see the Woolsey sisters in there.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, they were way ahead of their time. And I think, again, their mom had a lot to do with that. She sent them to Europe. She made sure they were really well educated. And I think that is a big part of it. They not only knew languages, Greek, Latin, I mean, everything.
Yeah.
And well-traveled. And they really understood what was going on in the world. And I think that's in those days, that was a big part of it, because women were kept at home doing domestic things. And their mom felt like they should be out, very similar to the Alcotts up in Massachusetts, that same kind of mindset. And they were just ahead of their time. They were abolitionists, and they felt like they could speak their mind. They were pretty full charge women, because they knew they were smart, and their mother raised them to be able to speak their minds. And I think that, and they also knew that, they were required, as Caroline was later, in the 1950s, required to do good works for other people. They were not allowed to just stay at home and sew. And they had lost their father, so they were on a budget. And but they spent every waking hour doing things for other people. They worked at the Colored Orphan Asylum, which was called at the time. They worked at other orphanages. They put their shoulder against the war effort. They said that when the Woolsey women gave up toys, they took up politics, and I think that says it all about them.
Wow, with the living on a budget, the descriptions of how they lived, I don't feel that in Brevesport Place, and but I would imagine that there was, because they were definitely of the higher class. They were invited to balls, parties, charity events where other people would write big checks, but they were there to solicit donations for their charities.
Absolutely. Oftentimes they would wear, like Abby, the eldest, Abigail, wore one dress. Her sisters made fun of her all the time. She had one black dress, and that's all she wore. She felt no need to, there's Abby Howland Woolsey. And she felt no compunction to make another dress. Her sister Jane, on the other hand, her next, I think she was a year younger than Abby. Jane was a clothes horse, and she had very beautiful red hair, and she loved jewel tones. There's Jane Stuart Woolsey, right? And so she was very different from her sister. And she was also a nurse on the Civil War battlefield. She wrote a book as well. She wrote Hospital Days. I don't know if you can see it there, but it's the
same. It's the same picture.
Yeah, that's another great companion book to Sunflower Sisters.
I enjoyed, while reading Sunflower Sisters, some of what I thought were current culture nods. You can correct me if I'm wrong. At one point, you did make a reference to Alexander Hamilton's wife, Eliza. had to. You can't read that line and not just, go through that. There was even a point where I felt she was like the Kellyanne Conway of their time. Oh, there's well-meaning people on both sides.
Oh,
Yeah, you
yes.
wrote,
You
Miss
found
Kelly,
all of them.
you wrote it.
I couldn't find those.
Oh, okay, but the part that really blew me away, and it was my first laughed out loud moment, was when the girls were sourcing sugar from plantations that did not have slaves, cotton, and their linens were with their clothing, not from slave plantations. I mean, when you say they're ahead of their time, I really felt like, are you really? These people were around then? Because everything that I've read to this point doesn't depict women being that politically active or woke even.
That's the beauty of reading all those letters. And I made really good notes about it. Anytime something like that came up, I would just note it. And, I think over the years, things get lost. But their father was a sugar merchant. And I think they spent years trying to live that down because they felt like that money that supported them and was left to them was made on the backs of slaves. So they very well understood what they had to do to kind of make up for that. But there were a lot of anyone that was an abolitionist. They tried not to use regular sugar. They did all sorts of things like that too. And now we consider that woke, but yeah, that's kind of the fun of it.
Yeah.
When you see those things coming back. Like, I don't know if you remember when, I love this scene, when Georgie gets vaccinated on the ship.
Oh, yeah. Was it
Frank
Bacon? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such a sensual scene because back then,
Yeah, she takes off her
dress down and show your shoulder was a big deal. And, she's got issues with Frank. But anyway,
no, we can talk. We can talk about Frank. Let's talk about Dr. Frank Bacon for just a moment. I did not.
Do we have a picture of Frank, or do we just have the girls?
No, we just have the girls.
Okay.
What did you think? What if you were casting Dr. Frank Bacon? What would he look like?
Oh, I have a picture.
Oh, you have a shot? Oh, you don't have to look at it now. Let me just ask this question though about him being, or about Georgie. I did not ever think that she was leading him on. I thought she was very, now maybe I missed something in the subtext, but when she says, I want to live a different kind of life, to travel freely once the war is over. I want to see far-flung places. She's avoiding being diminished daily. She's very clear that this is just her friend, that, it's not her fault he's in love with her. Really? Right. Is that just because of the culture of the team?
I understand. I know exactly how your frustration. Here's the thing. They grew up together. They were childhood friends. And I think it's her family that wanted, and his family, they wanted a match. Right. And in those days, a lot of people got married and it wasn't a love match. And so she's struggling with that. Her two older sisters have not gotten married, and they never do in reality. And it's, after you're 30 in those days, it was like, that's the Rubicon. So she was struggling with that. She wanted
some might think that that's a Rubicon even today. I'm just saying.
That is true.
But but love doesn't just strike once. So that was my first little like, okay, wait.
He also had a weird beard that she really did not like. Just saying.
Okay.
Sometimes it just takes one like weird thing in a guy and you go, But so that's what happened with her. So then, of course, once he is in, he's a doctor and he's in the war, there's something about doctors. I don't know. I just think that's so sexy. But that may be the Corona talking. Sorry.
Nice.
But I do think that once he's in the war and she's in the war and he gets an assistant who, Bethana.
I was wondering if that was Bethana or Bethana. Bethana?
I say Bethana, but I could be.
It could you wrote it.
Beta. Yeah. I have to refer to the audiobook because they know all. They know how it's all pronounced. But anyway, once she sees him with another woman and she starts going, wait a minute, he shaved off the beard. He's way cuter on the battlefield and, in the uniform. So I think then she's kind of like, oh, man. So I don't know. Some of us have been through those kind of things before. Not saying who, but Yeah, I think that you regret it sometimes when you go, oh man, what did I do? And all of that is from the letters because he brings her roses at the very beginning. I don't know if you remember
Yeah.
that. And she says to her sisters, I'll miss the roses, but not him.
Yeah.
She actually said that.
Because she does. She's very upfront with, this is not it. And it wasn't until he, like, I thought that, she really was like, wait a sec, when he came in to step in and aid and assist a relative. While in that was the turning point for me where she was like, oh wait, hero, I love him.
Yeah. Oh, with Joe.
Yeah, with Joe.
Now, that's a little bit of a spoiler, but he does. Seeing him in action as a doctor. I mean, I was falling in love with Frank Bacon. I think that's incredible that someone can come in and save someone's life. You just kind of go, I will give you whatever you want. So.
Yeah. The path that Georgeanna took to become a nurse. One of the great things about reading your book was finding out things that I thought I knew, but I really didn't know. Frederick Olmsted, and here in Spokane, I'm like, all right, yeah, the Olmsted brothers. Yeah, they did Central Park, or their dad did, and they also designed the park system here in Spokane, which I can't wait to show you when you come.
I did not know that.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
I have to come
yeah, Manitou Park.
Now, so let's do it.
Yeah, as long as you get those shots. But I didn't know that he was even involved remotely in providing medical services to the Union Army during the war. I mean, I thought he was just a landscape architect. No, there's more. And
I had no idea. Yeah, yes, he was the head of the Sanitary Commission, which is what Georgie's trying to get into in order to take the classes and get certified to be a nurse. And, spoiler, she does. But he becomes a family friend and helps them. They want to go be with Joe Howland, which is her brother-in-law, and in case he's hurt on the battlefield.
To be close to a family during a war or even anything like that time, you feel like you're part of it and you want to be available or around. Sure.
Well, weirdly, if someone was in your family, like your husband or your son, or your brother was hurt on the battlefield, you went down and took care of them. This is before the nurses were around. So all these women were in the hospital tents taking care of their relatives, and the doctors hated it because they had all these women, kind of clogging things up. So they were used to being really nasty to women. And so when these nurses arrived, the doctors kind of thought, oh, more women that are just going to be a big pain. They soon realized that people like Georgie carried so much in her pockets, they used to say, that she was practically a doctor.
Yeah.
So I think eventually a lot of the doctors did change their tune, but Georgie to the end said not one was civil to them. And when you think about that, she and her sister and all the other nurses were really doing a service for them.
Really? She also wrote her own book.
She did. And when I was starting, I thought, well, I'm going to, focus on Georgie because, not only do I love her whole story and everything, she wrote a book and, how wonderful. And then I ordered it from Amazon and it's called.
They had it on Amazon?
Yes. 3 weeks to Gettysburg, and this is it.
Oh my.
It's so tiny. Cute. Like, can you see? It's like.
Yeah.
It's 24 pages. It did help me a little bit, but I just thought, we can put that link up too. But, it talks about how she and her mother go to Gettysburg and spend 3 weeks there. And it's pretty fascinating what they do, back in those days, it's not really written as with any feelings in it because women weren't supposed to be writing books. I think she wrote it a little bit like a newspaper account of what was going on, but it still was super helpful. I mean, back then, if you wrote a book and like went on a tour, you were just ostracized. I mean, forget it.
Well, there was a scene though. Jane, her sister, did write a poem. That's a legit poem.
Oh, Mary.
My bad.
And you asked me before who was my favorite.
Yeah.
I'd have to say, other than Georgie, it was Mary.
Oh.
And she, well, we can't say what happens with Mary,
No.
but there she is with one. She had 4 children before any of the others had any children. She married a pastor. Back in those days, the pastors, and I guess today to an extent too, the pastors were like rock stars.
Yeah.
And so she married this pastor who was also a Howland, related to Joe Howland. It's all kind of, intermarried.
Families, cousins.
Yeah. And so she had 4 kids, but they called her the beauty of the family, which I always think is so funny. Nowadays, we're so careful not to kind of do that in the family, like, oh, she's the beautiful one. We wouldn't say that. But back then they were just like, well, yeah, she's the beauty. And she really, really was beautiful. And she wrote poetry and painted, and she was super talented. And she wrote this poem called Rainy Day at Camp. And it was in the pocket of every soldier, North and South. She went viral with her poem. Every soldier on the battlefield carried it because it was about dying on the battlefield and how you would go to heaven, and it kind of was comfort for them. But she could never, to the day she died, admit that she was the one that wrote it.
Wow.
And she wrote other poems, and each one became more successful than the last. But none of the Woolseys were allowed to admit that it was her that wrote it, because people assumed it was a man, because women can't write stuff.
No.
So it's really interesting that how many names does she have? Mary Elizabeth Watts Howland.
Oh, and the baby.
Abby, which she named after her sister. Yeah. So she's in the book, and we can't really say what happens with her, but I think she would definitely be my favorite after after Georgie.
There was also sprinkled throughout phrases. Now, I didn't consult the Urban Dictionary for the Civil War. However, I have you right here, so I'm going to ask you what some of them I could figure out. The necessary room. I was like, oh, that's cute. I'm now referring to the bathroom as the necessary room. I mean, there's that. I think I got what patty rollers were simply from, my background and, in researching about what that was. But I did not know what doing the bear in Central Park was. You want to tell me?
Like a bear hug.
That's just a bear hug.
Yeah.
Okay. There
Nothing
is that.
More. What were you thinking?
No. At one point, there was a colored woman, Mag Palm, they tried to blackbird me. Can you explain what blackbird was?
Mag Palm was a real person.
Really? Another one. What a surprise.
Yeah. Mag Palm, I love that character. Blackbirding is once you're free, Confederates would arrest you or take you into custody and bring you back down south to enslave you again. They did a lot. I mean, that's basically what happened in 12 Years a Slave.
Yeah.
Best movie ever.
Okay, so then what would be hot as a toppet?
Hot as Tofit.
Tofit, see?
My mom is a New Englander, so, and you're from Massachusetts originally.
I am, but I never heard that one. You got
hot
me.
as Tofit just means really, really hot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what Tofit is. I think it's something, I'm sure someone will write in and tell us, but I think it's food of some sort.
Huh. There is that.
But since I was little, my mom used to say that. So I thought, well, that's probably okay to put that in there since, it counts as like a New England saying.
Okay. The other thing, and I have the vague understanding of snuff and what it was, but there was a lot of different, especially with Anne May, about her little snuff habit with, today we'd call him a dealer and a playa, Jubal Smalls, who was, making things happen. What really was in there? I mean,
snuff is ground tobacco leaves, and people would, for years, probably way back in time, people would just use it and snort it. Yeah. And they carried it around, and they had beautiful little containers and things. I learned about that in another book, Tobacco and Smoking Among the Blue and the Gray. It's such a good book. If you're interested at all in the, it's got some amazing photographs of all the old-timey smoking stuff. So I learned a lot about snuff from that. And I thought, why not make Anne May a snuff addict? Because, sounds like snuff was amazing in terms of, the high that it would give you, but then afterwards, it was tough to withdraw from it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel bad we haven't talked about my least favorite character in the entire book. Anne May wasn't written to be, somebody that one would look up to, I would imagine. She did have a lot of trauma in her life that I think probably caused her to be that way. But it does bring up the phrase, one of the themes throughout the book, a person has to face things or else they get stuck. She avoided facing a lot throughout it. She didn't particularly, well, you referenced, getting married and not, needing to be in love. Well, she's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Was it she written so that, we could hate somebody?
Well, I think, you need conflict in a novel in order for it to, and I wanted to really accurately portray what slavery was like. And in order to have that, you have to have someone that really is going to, push all of the buttons. And I feel like Anne May I wanted to make her real, though. I think that she loves her brother who marches off to war, Harry, and he's lovely and helps, Sally Smith build a window down in the slave cabin. And so I think she's a mix of good and bad, frankly. And she's stuck in a really bad marriage. And she loves the guy in town that's supplying her with the snuff, but also gets drawn into a really bad, she's from New Orleans. Yeah. So she's a Confederate sympathizer, as is Jubal Smalls, the man that's supplying the snuff. And so, she gets into like a spy situation and makes Gemma write some things, because Anne May can't write, but Gemma can. As an enslaved woman, her Aunt Tandy Rose had taught her how to read and write. So, that gets into like a bad little triangle there for Anne May. And she has a hard time getting out of it. Yeah. And so when things get really bad, she, back then, I don't think people realize, if you were a traitor and you were Maryland's a border state, but if you could be proven to be hurting Union soldiers, which they prove with her, they were saying that they were going to execute those women, but they would put them in jail at least. And, she was really afraid for her life. Yeah, so. Yeah, and I did a lot of research with this book about Anne May within the Plantation household. This is super, super helpful. You can tell that it's got, a whole kind of
very well loved. Again, we will be sure to have all of links to those books from the conversation in there. And again, if you're watching now, you can click the link above, and that will take you straight to Auntie's, where you can purchase Sunflower Sisters, the autographed signed copy by Martha Hall Kelly. One of the things we're talking about, people getting stuck, having to face things. I love the way that Gemma was able to get out of her situation with Sally. Or not, I'm not like spoiling alert too much. Yeah.
Wait,
but she does. She works through. I mean, there's also some horrible things that happen with her. She and her sister Patience, they manage to do the best they can, I guess, in their situation. That was the first time I saw the sunflowers as a warning. Now, again, that was something that I learned from your book about, and I don't think that this is a spoiler alert. Sunflowers were warnings for the Underground Railroad. As being a sturdy flower that's going to last forever and that stays up there and looks good. But I love the way that they use that as a warning throughout the book. And I was wondering, where would each of the sisters, and when I say that sisters, that would be where do you think Georgie would put a sunflower in her life for one of the men in her life? Gemma for one of the men in her life. There's two. There's Nathan. There's Carter. And then even Anne May. Would she put out a sunflower for her father or her brother? No, she wouldn't put out sunflowers for anybody. All right, we'll start with that.
I have to say that is an amazing question. I think that it's such a creative question. I think that Georgie would have, and it makes me a little teary to think about it, but she would have warned her father. She and her father were really close. And he died when she was 8. And she was kind of
the favorite in a way of his. And she waited for his body to wash up onto the shore. She would go to the beach out in Far Rockaway just to wait and see maybe if he, was going to float back in, or it's so sad. But anyway, I think she would have warned him, because he came home because she had a piano recital, and she always felt guilty that he had, died because of her. So she would definitely do that. I think she would warn Frank Bacon too.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
I don't really say about what, but yeah, because he runs into a really bad thing at Gettysburg. So I think she would warn him. I think she would also warn Gemma, because Gemma gets caught in a bad thing too and has to go back down to the plantation. So she would warn her about that. And then Gemma, I think, would warn her pa. Yeah, her pa. He's a fictitious character, but I know,
but with that, it almost, it's like, I don't want to say, you could see something like that would happen. But when Carter shows up again, yay! I was another one of those cheering moments, like, okay, good. He's not disappeared. I love the way that you were able to intertwine and bring that to life. It was amazing to read such a female forward book about the Civil War, and the way that you were intertwining stories was just beautiful, really beautiful.
Oh,
well, we do have some questions that have been submitted.
Great.
Here we go. We have one in from and we're taking questions from all three of the books, because unless you're like me, staying up late making sure that, oh my gosh, this is an amazing book, and not being able to put it down. The first question is from Eileen. What types of source material did you use writing The Lilac Girls? Were German medical files available?
Yes. I mean, there's a lot available online, but I went to Poland and worked with groups that had studied at universities the operations, the experiments that they did on the Polish women. So I did a lot of research in Poland, but also at Ravensbrück. But online, the big resource is Harvard has put online all the tapes of the Nuremberg trials. So if you go on there and you search carefully enough, you can find Herta Oberhauser it's really fascinating.
Wow.
If you've got like 4 hours to go and, look up Herta. And actually, my fourth book, Herta's in it again. So I've been kind of back there again. But you can see everybody. Dr. Gebhardt, who was executed because of what he did at Ravensbrück. So that was a huge help. But there are also lots and lots of books about Ravensbrück. So that was super helpful. I'm about to put it up on my website, all the books that I used. Okay. So I'd say in a couple of weeks or so, that'll be up there if that would help.
Cool. There's another question coming in live from Jamie. Jamie says, thank you for the interview. And with your 3 books, in which order do you recommend reading them?
Oh, my goodness. A lot of people ask that. I never anticipated that question. I always like to think going from Lilac Girls to Lost Roses to Sunflower Sisters is a nice way to do it. But a lot of people, when Lost Roses came out, said they did it the other way, and they kind of liked that better, because you get a feeling for Caroline's early years. And if you use that logic, if you go all the way back to Sunflower Sisters, then you kind of, by the time you get to Lilac Girls, you understand Caroline Faraday pretty well. And I also put some things like Easter eggs into the different books. Like in the Civil War book, there's some pieces of furniture and other things like the Woolsey silver that show up in the other books. So it's kind of fun to see that, passed down. So I completely avoided, an actual answer to that. But really you can do it either way.
I love that, though, the Easter egg part of it, because, you really getting lost in a book is just one of the best experiences in the world. And to be able to look at that and go, oh, inside joke, I get that because I read that, is just super cool.
It's fun.
Yeah. Well, you made a reference that you're working on something else right there, or in your next book. What are you working on next? I mean, are you done with the flowers? I mean, come on, flower titles?
I'm done with the flowers. Yeah. I was going to show you my cork board that has all my new characters on it.
So you have the actual cork board, and it's not like just a Pinterest board.
No, it's my actual cork board.
Yay!
Really see it.
Ooh.
Can you see that?
My. That.
It's actually Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
And
those look like headshots.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I find them online and I use them as inspiration. It's a Cold War novel.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, there's 2 books coming up next. I've got them both written, but this is called The Golden Doves, and it is a book. It's a Cold War novel. I don't know if you know about Operation Paperclip, what happened after World War II. When
I'm going to learn from you.
They brought a lot of Nazi scientists over to work in programs for the army, the space program and other different things. And, a lot of them were bad guys that had, they should have stood trial. And so it's the story of 2 women, one American, one French, and they've survived Ravensbrück, but bad things were done to them by a really bad doctor there. And so he got off scot-free. And so they travel around the world trying to hunt him down for doing that to them. And it's really, really a thriller and fun. And it takes place in Rome and Paris and Venezuela. I feel like I've been so cooped up at home that I just wanted to write that kind of a book. So that's that book. And then after that is a contemporary thriller, which is really fun. And it actually
contemporary. Okay, like 2000s?
Yeah, like right now.
I'm just checking.
Yeah, I've always wanted to do that. And I thank God my publisher, Random House, is amazing. They were like, yeah, if you want to do that, you do it. So it takes place in my house, though. I live on a hay farm here in Connecticut, in rural Connecticut. And it's thinly disguised. It says it's Massachusetts, but it's actually my house. And it's really scary. Yeah, I went to a book signing or I was doing a book signing, and someone came up to me and said, would you be willing to come and teach my book club? Because I do that a lot and, talk about your books and, but it's at a prison. I run a book club at a prison. And I said, sure. I mean, I'm way into prison reform and, and so she said, well, the prison system goes 1 to 5, and this is a 5. It's maximum security, and it's all men. And so I started going, well, I don't know. So I went home that night and I started thinking, what if I did that and then something bad happened? So that was kind of the genesis of where the idea came from.
Okay.
And my husband says we may have to move because I've scared myself so badly writing about being in this house. So it's a small price to pay, I think. But it's fun. It's fun to write a contemporary book and, not have to look up what kind of carriage the people are, there's a lot of accuracy in a historical novel.
You can put that there. That's true. And then our last question always, it seems to be from Claire at Auntie's. What wants to know, what are you reading right now? What is on your nightstand? Or my goodness. What have you read? You're not sleeping in your office, are you?
I'm reading 2 things. No, I'm not sleeping. Sometimes I would like to. I'm reading a lot of Collette because the book about the Cold War book, one of the characters is French. So I've been reading a ton of Collette and I'm loving it. And then the other thing is this book, My Mother's Clothes. Because in that book, it's about the 50s. One of the women has a mom that had absolutely gorgeous clothes. And it's such a good book. I love this book. Sometimes I just pick it up and page through it. My mom was not into clothes at all. But I always wish that we had that kind of bond. So this is my way of kind of, scratching that itch. But that's what I'm reading. I wish I could say I was reading, something like some fabulous new thriller or something, but
that's because you're working on writing it. That's fine. And we look forward to that. I look forward to these next books coming out. I am looking forward to the after times so that we can have you here in Spokane where you would fill the theater and we can talk about your next book. I'm just so thrilled that you were able to join us on Northwest Passages today. It's
I'll
really
be
been a
there
treat.
whenever you say. Just say,
Excellent.
Martha, come visit me, and I'll be there.
I got your email. We'll make that happen. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
It was a blast. Now what we're going to do is raffle off some of the world famous Spokane, only available here, the beautiful Spokesman-Review Warhol print. And you might need to send me an email, or I will email you to see where we can pick it up. I don't want to fold this up and mail it to anybody. So the first, we're going to raffle two things. We'll raffle this, and then I will also give you your own copy of Sunflower Sisters. So, Jesse, there is our wheel of names, everybody that registered for a ticket today. So there's 68 of you in there, I believe. Give it a wheel. A whirl? It's going? It'll happen. Ta-da! Margaret Mahoney. I will be emailing you to find out where I can bring this fabulous Northwest Passages limited edition Spokesman-Review Tower print. And then for the next wheel, we will run your own copy of Sunflower Sisters.
Here we go.
And Kristen Larson. Kristen, thank you very much. I will make sure I will take the tabs of this out before I give it to you, Kristen. But again, thank you very much for joining us on Northwest Passages today. For our upcoming events, you can go to our website, spokesman.com/Northwest Passages, and sign up for our tickets, sign up for announcements, our newsletters. We look forward to seeing you at our next virtual event. Thanks so much.